Emma had always considered herself a competent, diligent worker. She prided herself on meeting deadlines, keeping her desk organized, and maintaining a calm, professional demeanor even under pressure. Her colleagues often remarked on how steady she was, how no project seemed to rattle her. Yet lately, there had been a subtle shift in her office. Something she couldn't quite define, a ripple beneath the surface that made her both uneasy and strangely aware. Her boss, Daniel, was a man who commanded respect naturally, not just through his position, but through his presence, his confidence, and the way he treated people. He had a quiet authority, the kind that made employees listen not out of fear, but admiration. Emma had admired him for months, his sharp mind, his careful approach to challenges, and the rare moments of warmth he offered those around him. But recently, that admiration had started to feel different, complicated. Small gestures, lingering glances, and moments of unexpected closeness had started to tug at her heart in ways she hadn't anticipated. It was late on a Friday. The office was almost empty. The hum of the air conditioning, the soft click of keyboards, and the distant sound of the city below formed a backdrop of calm. Emma was alone, finishing a report for an important client pitch. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples, feeling both exhausted and relieved that the week was ending. She saved her work, closed her laptop, and stood, stretching. As she walked toward the elevator, she was suddenly aware of footsteps behind her. Daniel appeared as if materializing out of the quiet shadows of the hallway. He wore his usual tailored suit, his posture relaxed but confident. "Leaving already?" he asked, his voice low, calm, and unexpectedly intimate for a professional encounter. Emma startled slightly, then nodded. "Just finishing up some work," she said, trying to sound casual while her pulse quickened. She kept her gaze forward, hoping her sudden awareness of him didn't betray how flustered she felt. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. Daniel stepped inside and she followed. As soon as the doors closed, the familiar hum of the elevator filled the small space. But there was also a tension that hadn't been there before. The city lights outside reflected off the polished metal walls, casting fleeting glimmers across their faces. The confined space made everything feel amplified, every glance, every shift in stance. Every subtle change in tone seemed more pronounced. "I wanted to talk about the presentation tomorrow," Daniel began, stepping closer. His voice was steady, professional, but there was an undercurrent, a softness that Emma hadn't noticed before. She nodded, focusing on her notes, but she felt her attention wandering. His presence seemed to occupy more space than usual, and she could feel the strange weight of curiosity and anticipation pressing on her chest. Emma tried to maintain composure. She reminded herself that he was her boss, that professionalism must come first, and that any personal feelings could complicate her career. She focused on the words of the presentation, the client's needs, and the points they needed to cover. Yet despite her best efforts, the air between them felt charged. It was a quiet, unspoken connection, subtle yet unmistakable. Something that made her pulse quicken and her thoughts drift in directions she didn't fully understand. Daniel's eyes occasionally flicked toward her, assessing, thoughtful, and Emma found herself caught in those glances, unsure whether to look away or meet them. There was a tension she had never felt in the office before, a delicate balance between respect and the unknown, between professional boundaries and emotions she hadn't dared to name. "I know it's been a long week," Daniel continued, his tone softening slightly, "and I just wanted to make sure you're handling everything okay. You've been doing an incredible job, Emma." She looked up from her notes, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," she replied softly, feeling warmth spread through her chest. It was gratitude, yes, but it was also something more subtle, something that made her acutely aware of him, aware of the quiet presence beside her. The elevator stopped at the next floor, and the doors hesitated before opening. Daniel glanced at her, an unreadable expression on his face, and then spoke again, quieter this time. "Are you sure you want to stay so late all alone?" Emma froze for a moment, torn between logic and instinct. Of course she wanted to go home. Of course she wanted to leave. Yet there was a part of her that was captivated by his attention, by the unexpected intensity of his gaze, and by the strange safety she felt with him. She nodded slowly, unsure of what compelled her to stay silent, unsure of whether she should speak or step back. The doors closed again, sealing them in the quiet, moving space. Time seemed to stretch differently. Every detail, the soft hum, the slight tilt of his head, the way his presence seemed to fill the elevator, became magnified. Emma realized she was experiencing something she had never felt before, a moment of suspended reality, where emotions blurred the line between personal and professional, where curiosity, respect, and the hint of attraction created a quiet tension she didn't know how to manage. Daniel leaned slightly, just enough that she could feel the shift, careful, deliberate, but not imposing. Emma's thoughts raced. Should she pull back, assert her boundaries, and remind herself that he was her boss? Or should she allow herself to feel, even if only for a fleeting moment, the intensity of connection that was building in that confined space? "I hope you know how much I value your work," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with an unexpected intensity. "And more than that, I value you." Emma's chest tightened. She wasn't sure whether it was excitement, confusion, or the raw thrill of being seen in a way she hadn't expected. She realized that this was a pivotal moment, one that could alter her perception of him, of herself, and of the boundaries she had worked so hard to maintain. The elevator moved slowly upward, the soft mechanical hum accompanying the rhythm of her heartbeat. Emma's mind was a whirlwind of questions and emotions. She respected Daniel, admired him, and yet in that moment, she felt both exposed and oddly connected. The moment was delicate, charged with tension, and yet filled with unspoken understanding. When the elevator dinged at the floor just below the ground level, Emma took a deep breath. The doors remained closed for a heartbeat longer than usual. Daniel's presence, his gaze, and his words lingered in her mind. She realized that this encounter, brief as it was, would leave an indelible mark on her emotions and her perception of the professional world she had always navigated so carefully. As the elevator continued its descent, Emma understood that something significant had shifted. She had encountered emotions she hadn't anticipated, feelings of admiration, curiosity, and a subtle, quiet tension that suggested more than just workplace camaraderie. And though she didn't yet know how to handle them, she knew that she could no longer ignore the complexity of her feelings or the impact Daniel had on her. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, Emma's heart was racing, her mind buzzing with questions. She stepped out, the cool air of the building lobby contrasting sharply with the warmth of the elevator, and realized that her ordinary Friday night had become extraordinary in ways she hadn't imagined. The encounter was over, but its effect would linger, shaping her thoughts, her feelings, and the subtle tension that now existed between her and Daniel. She walked toward the exit, unsure of how to process the experience. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as a fleeting emotional moment, a misreading of signals in a professional environment. Yet another part of her knew it had touched something deeper, a recognition of connection, vulnerability, and the delicate, unpredictable nature of human emotions. Emma paused at the glass doors, glancing back at the elevator. She didn't know what the future would hold or how she would navigate the emotions that had been stirred. But she knew that her perspective on Daniel and on herself had changed forever. The night was quiet, the city lights twinkling beyond the building. And for the first time in weeks, she felt both apprehensive and alive, aware that life had just shifted in a subtle, irrevocable way. Cliffhanger, Emma left the building with questions she couldn't answer yet. How would she handle the emotions that had surfaced? Could she maintain her professionalism while navigating the unexpected connection that had emerged in that small moving space? The answer was unknown, and the uncertainty filled her with both tension and anticipation. After that Friday evening in the elevator, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Every time she walked through the office, every glance toward his office, every interaction in meetings, her mind replayed the quiet intensity of that moment. She told herself to focus on work to maintain professionalism. Yet the memory clung stubbornly to her thoughts, coloring her perception of the office of him and of herself. The following Monday, the office felt slightly different. Emma noticed subtle changes in Daniel's demeanor. His smiles lingered a little longer. His words carried a softer tone, and there was a careful attentiveness in his interactions that hadn't been there before. Emma tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but she couldn't deny that the tension, that unspoken understanding from the elevator, still existed. She dove into her work, keeping herself busy. Reports, client emails, strategy meetings, they all provided distractions. But her focus was always interrupted by a flicker of awareness, a glance from Daniel that seemed to hold more than professional regard, a question that lingered just a beat too long, a moment of shared silence where the office felt paused. Suspended between them one afternoon, Emma stayed late to prepare a presentation. The office was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional sound of traffic outside the window filling the space. She was reviewing slides when Daniel appeared at her doorway. He looked calm, composed, but there was a softness in his eyes, a subtle warmth that made Emma's chest tighten. "You're staying late again?" he said, voice gentle, yet carrying the same intensity she remembered from the elevator. Emma looked up, blinking at him, unsure whether to respond with casual professionalism or admit the truth that she felt drawn to his presence, that she was unsettled and yet strangely comforted by it. "I just wanted to make sure the presentation is ready," she said, her voice steady but carrying a subtle note of vulnerability. Daniel nodded, stepping inside the office. He didn't close the door completely. Instead, he leaned lightly against the frame, observing her work. There was a quiet tension in the room, not threatening or forceful, but undeniably charged with emotion. Emma could feel her pulse quicken, and she reminded herself to stay grounded. He was her boss. He was a professional. And yet something in the atmosphere made it impossible to ignore the subtle pull she felt toward him. "I know this week has been stressful," Daniel began, voice calm, measured. "And I wanted to make sure you're managing everything okay. I notice how hard you're working." Emma swallowed. His words were simple, professional, yet the care behind them made her heart flutter. She nodded, trying to focus on her computer screen. But she couldn't help noticing the gentle way he observed her, the attentiveness in his gaze, and the subtle kindness in his tone. "I'm fine," she said softly, though the truth was complicated. She was fine in the sense that her work was under control. But the truth was also that her emotions had been stirred in a way she couldn't quite articulate. She felt a mix of admiration, attraction, and confusion, all swirling together in a quiet storm she wasn't ready to confront. Daniel moved closer, careful and deliberate, not imposing but present. "Emma, I value your dedication. Not just your work, but you as a person. I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable." Her stomach fluttered. She realized she wasn't uncomfortable, not in a fearful sense, but in a way that made her acutely aware of herself, her feelings, and the magnetic pull of someone she respected deeply. The moment was delicate. It was emotional, not physical, but it carried the weight of tension, understanding, an unspoken connection. Emma's mind raced. Should she step back, assert her boundaries, and protect the professional distance she had maintained so carefully? Or should she acknowledge the feelings she couldn't ignore, explore the possibility of connection, even in a limited emotional sense? She felt both empowered and vulnerable, aware that any decision she made could shape not only her career, but her inner emotional world. Daniel spoke again, breaking her thoughts. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that I respect you and I'm honest with my feelings. That's all." She looked up at him, meeting his gaze. There was no pressure, no expectation, only honesty and calm presence. Emma realized she could feel intensely, even in a professional context, and still maintain her integrity. She could acknowledge the attraction, the admiration, the emotional tension, without allowing it to cross boundaries or compromise her principles. As the evening wore on, they worked together quietly, side by side, sharing ideas about the presentation. reviewing data and discussing client needs. The tension remained, but it transformed from something chaotic and confusing into something more controlled, mutual, and reflective. There was a sense of understanding between them, an acknowledgement that the connection existed but did not need to disrupt their professional lives. The city lights outside cast soft reflections on the office windows, and for a moment, Emma felt suspended in time. She understood that these moments, brief and charged as they were, could have the power to shape her, to deepen her awareness of emotions, boundaries, and human connection. She felt respect for Daniel, curiosity about her own responses, and a growing realization that emotional tension could exist without crossing ethical lines. After an hour, Daniel spoke, signaling it was time to leave. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, with a nod and a small, sincere smile. Emma nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. She knew that the tension would not disappear entirely, that the emotions stirred in the elevator and in the late-night office moments would linger. And she understood, in a quiet, internal way, that the path forward required awareness, self-control, and thoughtful reflection. Walking home that night, Emma replayed every detail of the interaction. She analyzed his tone, his expressions, the subtle cues she had noticed. She considered her own responses, her fascination, and the emotional pull she had felt. For the first time, she realized that emotional connections could be complex, layered, and meaningful even in a professional setting, and that acknowledging them didn't make her weak, only human. The following week, their interactions continued with the same nuanced tension. Casual glances, quiet smiles, and moments of shared attention punctuated their workdays. Emma found herself both anxious and exhilarated, aware that she had experienced something unusual, a moment of connection that was rare, delicate, and potentially transformative. Yet she remained professional. She maintained boundaries, completed her tasks, and navigated the office dynamics with careful consideration. The emotional tension existed, but it was tempered by respect, understanding, and a mutual commitment to propriety. Emma discovered that one could feel deeply, experience attraction or admiration, and still act responsibly and ethically. By the end of the week, Emma had gained clarity. The elevator incident and the late-night office moments had been lessons in emotional awareness, self-control, and respect for boundaries. She realized that attraction and emotional tension could coexist with professionalism, and that navigating such feelings with maturity was a skill she now possessed. Cliffhanger. Emma sensed that her connection with Daniel was far from over, that future interactions would continue to challenge her emotions, test her boundaries, and reveal the delicate balance between admiration, attraction, and professionalism. She had entered a world of emotional tension, and now she had to decide how to manage it without losing herself. The following Monday, Emma arrived at the office with a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The weekend had given her time to think, to reflect on the emotional tension that had grown between her and Daniel. She realized that while the feelings she had experienced were intense, they didn't need to dominate her professional life. She could acknowledge them, understand them, and still act responsibly. The office was quiet as she walked to her desk, the hum of computers and the faint scent of coffee creating the familiar environment she had always found comforting. Daniel was already at his office reviewing documents, his focus apparent yet softened by the subtle warmth she had come to notice in his demeanor. Emma took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay grounded, to maintain professionalism while navigating the complex emotions that lingered from their previous interactions. As she settled into her work, Daniel approached her desk. "Good morning, Emma," he said, his tone calm and measured, yet carrying the quiet intensity she had noticed before. "I hope you've had a good weekend." Emma looked up and smiled. Feeling a flutter in her chest, she quickly contained. "I did, thank you. And you?" He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I did. I've been reviewing the project timelines, and I think we're in good shape for tomorrow's meeting. But I wanted to check in with you before we start the day." They spoke about work matters for several minutes, exchanging ideas, refining plans, and reviewing strategies. Yet beneath the surface of their professional conversation, there was an unspoken awareness, a quiet connection that neither needed to name but both felt. Emma realized that this was the first time she had experienced a relationship dynamic where emotional tension and professional respect could coexist without conflict. Later in the morning, during a brief break, Daniel approached her desk again. "Emma," he began, hesitating slightly, "I want to say thank you for how you handled things last week. I know it wasn't easy balancing everything while dealing with emotions." Emma paused, recognizing the honesty in his words. She nodded, her voice steady but sincere. "I appreciate that, Daniel. It wasn't easy, but I think we both handled it well. It made me realize a lot about myself, about how I respond to situations, and how I can maintain professionalism even when emotions are involved." Kay smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips that conveyed both respect and understanding. "I agree. I think we've learned something important about boundaries, about awareness, and about how to navigate challenges responsibly." As the day progressed, Emma found herself more confident, more aware of her emotions, and more capable of balancing the intensity of her feelings with the demands of her professional life. She realized that the elevator incident and the late-night office moments had been pivotal lessons in emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and maturity. She could admire someone, feel drawn to them, and still maintain her integrity. In the afternoon, Daniel called her into his office for a quick review of the presentation before the client meeting. The office was quiet, the blinds partially drawn, casting soft shadows across the room. Emma felt a momentary tension as she walked in, but it was tempered by understanding and respect. She was no longer overwhelmed by her emotions. She was aware of them, acknowledged them, and could act with clarity. They reviewed the slides together, discussing content, visuals, and talking points. Daniel's guidance was constructive, supportive, and professional. Yet there was a subtle warmth in his tone that reassured Emma she could express her thoughts openly without judgment. They collaborated efficiently, the atmosphere charged with mutual respect and a quiet emotional connection that neither needed to name explicitly. After the meeting, as they returned to their desks, Daniel spoke softly. "Emma, I want you to know that I value you, not just your work, but your insight, your perspective, and your presence. I hope you never feel that you have to suppress your thoughts or feelings around me professionally." Emma felt a swell of gratitude. She realized that she had gained something profound. The understanding that emotional connection didn't need to cross boundaries to be meaningful. She could feel deeply, experience attraction or admiration, and still act responsibly, protecting both her career and her emotional well-being. Over the next few weeks, the tension between them evolved into a subtle, respectful friendship. They shared moments of quiet support, exchanged smiles and brief conversations that carried a sense of mutual understanding, and collaborated on projects with renewed trust. Emma found herself enjoying the professional relationship in a way that felt richer, more human, and more emotionally grounded than before. One evening, Emma stayed late again, reviewing client reports for an upcoming pitch. Daniel appeared at the doorway, as he often did during late hours, his presence calm and non-intrusive. "Still working?" he asked, a gentle tone in his voice. Emma looked up and smiled. "Yes, I wanted to make sure everything is perfect for tomorrow." He nodded and stepped inside, leaning lightly against the doorway. "I admire your dedication," he said. "I hope you know that it doesn't go unnoticed." Emma felt a quiet warmth at his words. She realized that the feelings she had experienced in the elevator and during their late night interactions had transformed, no longer chaotic or overwhelming, but refined, controlled, and meaningful. They had evolved into a recognition of mutual respect, emotional awareness, and shared understanding. "I appreciate that," she replied, her voice steady. "And I've realized that learning to balance emotions and professionalism is an important skill. I feel more confident because of it." Daniel smiled again, the quiet acknowledgement of their shared growth evident in his expression. "I'm glad to hear that. You've grown a lot, and it shows in your work, your confidence, and your presence." As the evening wore on, Emma closed her laptop and prepared to leave. She felt a sense of calm, clarity, and accomplishment. The emotional tension that had once felt overwhelming now existed as a quiet memory, a reminder of personal growth, emotional intelligence, and the importance of boundaries. Walking out of the office, Emma reflected on the journey she had experienced. The elevator encounter, the late-night work sessions, and the unspoken moments of understanding had taught her more than she had anticipated. She had learned that emotional tension and professional respect could coexist, that attraction and admiration didn't have to compromise integrity, and that self-awareness was a powerful tool for navigating complex feelings as she stepped into the cool evening air. Emma felt a renewed sense of self. She had faced emotions that could have disrupted her life but had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. The connection with Daniel remained a quiet, respectful presence in her professional life, a reminder that human interactions could be meaningful, emotional, and complex without ever crossing ethical lines. In the weeks and months that followed, Emma continued to thrive at work. Her relationship with Daniel remained professional yet warm, marked by mutual respect, quiet support, and a subtle, unspoken understanding. The emotional lessons she had learned guided her interactions with colleagues, clients, and herself. She felt more capable of navigating the complexities of life, balancing emotional awareness with professional responsibility, and embracing growth without compromise. By the time the next major project rolled around, Emma realized that the elevator moment and the emotional tension that followed had become a defining experience in her life. It was a story she would carry with her, a memory of self-discovery, emotional growth, and the delicate balance between admiration, attraction, and professionalism. And as she looked toward the future, she knew she was prepared, emotionally grounded, confident, and aware of her own strength. She had experienced a moment of intensity that could have overwhelmed her, but instead, it had shaped her into a more aware, mature, and empowered individual. Final reflection, emotional hook ending. The elevator had been more than a small, confined space. It had been a catalyst for growth, reflection, and understanding. Emma had learned that emotional tension could be managed. Feelings could be acknowledged without losing control, and human connections could be meaningful without compromising integrity. That night, as she walked through the quiet streets on her way home, she smiled, knowing that she had emerged stronger, wiser, and fully aware of her own heart.